David Brewster here with another 3 for All. This is 3 Steve Morse Licks from 1996, and I love Steve Morse. Steve Morse is one of my favorite guitarists of all time, and I've had a lot of people ask, like, who's your favorite guitarist? And I think they expect a certain answer, and I almost always say Jeff Beck. You know, Jeff Beck is number one for me. I love Jeff. And then if you start making some sort of like top 5 or top 10, which I hate making lists like that, I would have to put Steve Morse at number 2. You know, I love Jeff and Steve Morse. I'd probably put, Eddie Van Halen like number 3. And then you can keep, filtering down the list somewhere. After the top 3, I just kind of give up. You know, I don't really like making itemized lists of musicians, but I understand why people do that. But with Steve, he's the epitome of everything I love about music and being a musician. You know, it's obvious he loves music. It pours through his veins and his pores. You know, I mean, he sweats music. And this lesson's going to be very difficult. You know, Steve is not for the faint of heart or a beginner or something like that. And if you want to think of music like mathematics, you know, AC/DC would be like basic arithmetic, and Steve Morse would be something like calculus or something that's very advanced, very difficult and demanding. And anyway, this is going to be a fun lesson, and there's some very challenging licks coming up, so here we go. I just shared that image of a lesson I had in Guitar Player that was a tribute to Steve Morse. So that kind of further proves, my devotion and dedication and just admiration for this guy. You know, I mean, I've read, his book, Open Ears. I've got a lot of his music and albums and stuff like that. I've worked through a lot of his instructional material, and I've been following him since I was in high school. And, he's a legend. You know, Dixie, Dregs, played with Kansas. You know, he's toured with Deep Purple for almost 2 decades now. Steve Morse Band, a lot of solo albums. High Tension Wires, of course, is, an essential guitar album. The first lick is this scale run. It's the speedy, kind of alternate pick scale run with some chromatic notes, and there's also some kind of pull-off, pivot ideas in there too. But it looks and sounds like this. It's really challenging. Let me try that one more time. It's a tricky lick, and I'm kind of screwing up the end there, but let me walk through it. So it looks like this, really slow. I think the hardest part is getting back to that last bend too. It kind of eludes my fingers there for some reason. But that's basically A mixolydian. You know, he's starting on the note B, but it's flirting with like an A7 or A mixolydian sound. And he's flying up the first part there. So, and then when he gets to the B string, there's a 4-note pattern right there. So he's adding some, chromatic passing tones in there. And then on the high E string, he comes down chromatic, which is really interesting. Like that. And then he starts doing like almost like a pivot arpeggio. And then he jumps up basically in the 12th position right there. And he kind of threw in another chromatic, idea right there. But the cool lick. The next lick is kind of a signature, Steve Morse idea, and it's the string skipped chromatic idea. And, he's a big alternate picker, and he doesn't really sweep. And when he does string skipping, which, there's a couple ideas in this lesson that involve, string skipping, he's picking, he's picking more than he's actually using legato. I'm more of a legato player, so I'm going to add a little bit of legato in there. So just keep in mind when Steve plays it, I'm pretty sure he's just picking everything. There might be a little bit of, hammer-ons or pull-offs kind of popping in, but it looks like this. It's a crazy lick. So slowly, we're doing this. And it's really unusual because when he gets to the A string, he's using everything except for his index finger to grab that B, C, and C sharp right there. Really cool lick, and as you can hear, I'm using a little bit more slurring in there because I'm not Steve Morse, for first and foremost. I wish I was, but that's just kind of the difference between his style and mine. He's an aggressive picker, and I'm kind of a laid-back, slurry kind of person. You know, I love legato and the smooth sound of hammer-ons and pull-offs. Doing like half and half, you know, half legato, half picked, whereas I'm pretty sure Steve is just full-on picking. The next lick is this kind of cross-picked string skipping idea once again, and this is another, you know, kind of typical phrase you'll hear in Steve Morse's, you know, world or universe. And once again, we're still flirting with A7, but he's doing this pull-off pattern, or a string skipping kind of pull-off pattern, between the B and the D string, and he's moving between the C sharp and this D note, and he adds a bend, and he starts playing through that again, and then he modifies the shape to where you got this G and B on the G string near the end, but it looks like this. I think at the end he just kind of slides off that A. But once again, so slowly, we're just basically jumping between that B and D string, like I said. And then bend that D up to an E, and then start the pattern again. And the last time you got that stretchier shape there between B and G. And then I think, like I said, he just slides off the A. But I actually kind of targeted, you know, and hit that note. Okay, here's a bonus lick, and this didn't come from his live solo. This actually came from a different video that I found, but he was breaking down, you know, alternate picking through arpeggios. And I know for a lot of sweep picking arpeggio players out there, they don't like alternate picking through arpeggios. They prefer sweeping because it's a little smoother and kind of easier to grab. I mean, it's definitely a difficult technique, but once you have the sweep, you know, maneuvers and kind of the ability, you can start flying around, you know, through arpeggios. But as soon as you have notes that you aren't playing, or maybe you're avoiding a string or skipping over a string, that can create some sweep picking problems. But with Steve, you know, he alternate picks through arpeggios, which is crazy, but it's so inspiring and different, you know, and that's one of his kind of legendary statuses, you know, is like, yeah, he picks everything. He doesn't sweep, you know, he picks all his arpeggios. And this idea is really interesting. It's very difficult, but it sounds like this. And you can see right there, we're basically, it's almost like a violin. And I think I do remember he was talking about this, you know, in the video that I found. But a violinist can play an arpeggio and play, you know, I guess it's through the bowing and the technique of doing it. They almost have this kind of up and down kind of sound with an arpeggio. And, you know, that's really just a 3-note phrase. You know, the note changes as it moves along. But we're kind of playing with like an E11 kind of thing, I guess, you know, because it's in E, but we're adding that A note in there too. But right there, we're just picking through, you know, the E, the B, and then we're grabbing that A note up there. And there's G sharp. He also came over there and grabbed that F sharp back there, which would be the 9th. And I think in the video he also kind of came down on the B string. You know, really interesting, and you're really just playing part of the scale. You know, E major, technically, but it's played as an arpeggio. You know, really interesting. You know, I could find a lot of different ways of using that, you know, in a solo or in a song. It's a really interesting sound because you hear it start low, it jumps really high, and it goes right back down to, you know, a lower interval there. And it's really easy for your pick to kind of get hung up on the strings, which you probably hear a little bit of that right there, where you've really got to have, you know, an efficient and clean technique. So here, listen to Steve play it. It's going to wrap this look at 3 licks from Steve Morse from 1996. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm a huge Steve Morse fan. You know, I'm like Wayne Campbell whenever I think of Steve Morse. And I've met Steve, you know, a few times. I met him at an AM show. He came and did a clinic at AIM when I was a student at the Atlanta Institute of Music. It was him and Dave LaRue. And super approachable, super friendly. You know, just a really warm and caring, kind of soft-spoken guy, you know, and then he straps the guitar on, turns on an amp, and just melts your face, you know, where it's like, oh my gosh, that little quiet guy, you know, just completely, you know, he just took out a whole family over here with that guitar. I mean, he really is just a dangerous musician, but in a good way. It's inspiring, you know, all the music that he's written and composed and recorded and performed, and instructional material and albums and books and all sorts of things. So definitely, if you're not hip to Steve Morse, listen to some Dixie Dregs. Listen to some, you know, some of his solo material, maybe some of the stuff with Deep Purple. And there's a ton of stuff you can learn from him. Great player. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.